This is the Crohn's disease that we see. And over here, what we see, we look at the ulcerative colitis lesion. Okay. So what is very important, if you look at the Crohn's disease, it is involving any part of the colon. Okay. Might it be the colon or the rectal part or the sigmoid colon part. Okay. Or it might involve the small intestine part as well. Can you appreciate the small intestine has been involved? And can you also see that there are certain areas which are involved, okay, and there are certain areas which are completely all right, okay. So there are skip areas, yes. So one very important point that we have to understand over here is that this Crohn's disease is occurring anywhere. It occurs anywhere, okay. But most importantly, it occurs at the level of the ileum and it involves the small intestine. Yes, you all will agree with me at this point. Yes, everyone is going to agree. Okay, everyone is going to agree with this point. Okay. Now, if you see over here, if you compare it with ulcerative colitis, what do we see? It is only the sigmoid colon. Okay, it is only the sigmoid colon and the rectum that is mainly involved. Yes. So over here, there's the involvement of the colon along with the rectum. Okay. The normal villus and this is a normal crypt. Now, can you see over here at this particular point, this particular crypt, is it looking like a normal crypt? Yes, is it normal? What can you see over here? What can you appreciate? Over here, the number one thing I can see,
neutrophils.
Neutrophilic infiltration. Neutrophilic infiltration is seen over here. And this neutrophilic infiltration, what is it doing? This neutrophilic infiltration is actually causing damage to this particular crypt. Okay, it is leading to what is called as a crypt damage. Now, this cycle of cryptal diseases, so the topic of discussion is inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, so this is basically this disorder. It is a chronic inflammatory disorder which is characterized by an altered interaction between the intestinal microbiome and the host immune system. So what happens that our own body, they start to fight against the own gut microbiome. Okay, one very important thing, this takes place, this happens in individuals who are genetically predisposed, So there is some genetic predisposition which is there. And ultimately, because of it, it leads to inappropriate mucosal immune activation. So what happens usually that our immune system, okay, there is actually a symbiotic relationship between our immune system and between the gut microbiome. Okay, so they live in harmony, okay, usually. But in this particular situation, our immune system, they turn against the gut microbiome. Okay, understand? This is the problem that we face over here. So one very important thing that we have to understand that inflammatory bowel disease are of two most important types. Okay, can anyone name them? Yes, what are the two spectrums of inflammatory bowel disease? Yes, one we are having Crohn's disease. Yes, have you heard about Crohn's disease? And another is your ulcerative colitis. So to be very fair, okay, we are going to understand that this Crohn's disease basically, okay, it can affect any part of the GIT. Okay, I'm not saying any part of colon. It can affect any part of the gastrointestinal tract. More commonly, it is affecting the ileum, okay, or the ileocecal region, So this happens more commonly. Okay, plus it causes the involvement of the entire thickness of the gut epithelium. Okay, so there is a transmural involvement. So what is transmural? What is partial involvement? What are the layers of the GIT involved? I am going to show all the diagrams. Okay, just have patience. So this is the first spectrum, that is the Crohn's disease. On the other hand, we have another inflammatory bowel disease that is called as ulcerative colitis. Okay, and this is the one which is involving the colon plus the rectum. Okay, and over here, unlike your Crohn's disease, the whole thickness of the gut wall is not at all involved. Only the superficial mucosa and the submucosa is involved. Okay, this is the basics that I am telling you. Okay, so going over some of the important aspects, or some of the important information with regards to ulcerative colitis. So we are going to understand that it basically affects individuals who are in their teenage years, okay, in their teens or in their early 20s. This is the age group where they are involved, and usually they are involving the females. Okay, the females are involved much more. Now, one very important discovery is that the incidence of inflammatory bowel disease is very high in developed countries as compared to developing country. Can anyone tell me why? Yes. Have you all read about IBD? Yes. Any answers? See, this is basically explained. Yes. Yes. Someone is saying something. Yes. Why? Why is it so that the developed country people are more involved as compared to developing country? Yes. So one very important factor over here comes the hygiene hypothesis. So having a better hygiene is actually bad. Okay, so what happens over here, that what is the hygiene hypothesis? So normally, if this is our intestine and this is the immune cells of the intestine, so when they are constantly exposed to some or the other kind of organism, okay, so these immune cells, they know, okay, they know that these are the usual organisms which are residing, and they make peace with those organisms, okay, usually. So what happens that normally in people from the developing countries, they do not maintain that much of hygiene. So from childhood, the immune system of the body learns to recognize those particular antigens. But in countries, okay, which are developed countries, so over there is a better hygiene. So the immune system does not have that exposure to that kind of microbes, okay, that the immune system of a person of a developing country has. Okay, so as a result, a person from a developing country, the immune system from a developing country is more well versed with the microbes as compared to countries which are developed. Okay, so remember this thing very importantly. Okay, so in developed countries, you have improved food storage condition, you have improved food storage condition, as well as you have decreased food contamination. Okay, so as a result, there is a hygiene which is maintained in case of developed country. So if hygiene is maintained, what happens that our immune system, they do not get a chance to get educated or to become familiar with the microorganisms which are residing in the gut. So as a result, what happens that the immune regulation doesn't happen. So these individuals, okay, even the normal gut microbiome that is there, these start to attack the normal gut microbiome. And that is when the inflammation comes into the picture. And that is why the entire GI tract is not the entire GI tract, but a part of the GI tract is involved with inflammation. And this gives rise to what is called as your inflammatory bowel disease. Okay. So basically, because of this improved food storage condition and decreased contamination, there is an inadequate immune regulation. Inadequate immune regulation. Okay. Inadequate immune regulation to limit the mucosal immune response. To limit the mucosal immune response. So I hope everyone has understood what is the reason why inflammatory bowel disease is more common in developed countries as compared to developing countries. Now, a recent data suggests that even in Asians, okay, the incidence of inflammatory bowel disease has now increased. Okay, so what is the reason? The reason is that now people are getting more aware of the hygiene. So they are also taking care of hygiene much more as compared to before. So that is why the incidence of inflammatory bowel disease has gone up in those countries. Now, looking at the pathogenesis, one of the most important and the most complex aspects, okay, of inflammatory bowel disease is the pathogenesis. So in the pathogenesis, we have to understand that there is an abnormality which is lying. Okay, so there's an abnormal epithelial barrier function. There is also an abnormal host microbial interaction. That is, the immune system of the host and the gut microbe interaction is not proper. So there is an abnormality at that particular level. Thirdly, there is an abnormal immune regulation. Our immune system, they do not recognize the gut microbiome. So the regulation is not there. Okay. They become angry at the gut microbe very easily. So the regulation is lost. Okay. So very, very important thing that we have to understand, that there is a particular gene that is called as a NOD gene. Okay. I will tell you about it. So there, as I told you in the definition of inflammatory bowel disease, that this kind of disorder develops in a genetically predisposed individual. So what are the genetic mutations or what are the genetic changes? So polymorphism means any variant of the normal, that is polymorphism. So polymorphism in the NOD2 gene, okay, it is strongly associated with the development of Crohn's disease. Strongly associated with Crohn's disease. Okay, just remember. Now, one very important aspect is that not only genetics, okay, but it is hypothesized that even the environmental factors play an important role. Why we are saying? Because there has been, they have shown that there is an increased incidence of IBD. Increased IBD incidence is seen in certain populations. Okay, for example, in case of Caucasians. So environment is also supposed to play an important role. Okay. So let us start with the pathogenesis. Okay, this was a brief idea. So the number one thing in the pathogenesis that we are going to understand is our mucosal immunity. What is happening at the level of our mucosal immune system? So mucosal immunity. Let us understand. Anyone has any idea about it? About mucosal immunity, how they are causing IBD. So try to understand something very, very carefully. So number one over here is polymorphisms. Polymorphisms, as I told you, it is variations of normal, that is polymorphisms. So there are certain polymorphisms, okay, which can involve certain pro-inflammatory genes. So as a result, polymorphisms in certain pro-inflammatory genes, example interferon gamma genes, they have been hypothesized to play an important role in altering the mucosal immunity, as well as not only the polymorphisms in pro-inflammatory gene, but also the polymorphisms involving the anti-inflammatory genes. So what are the anti-inflammatory genes? Yes, can anyone tell me? Anti-inflammatory genes, for example, we have interleukin 10 or interleukin 10 receptor. So polymorphisms in these genes have been shown to have a role in development of inflammatory bowel disease. Similarly, there are T helper cells. Now, do you know which are the T helper cells? Yes, can anyone tell me? These are the CD4 plus T cells. Yes, these are T helper cells. And the CD4 plus T cells, they are of how many types? Yes, can you tell me? They are of three main types. If you remember, it is T helper 1, T helper 2, and T helper 17. Okay, just brushing up your basic knowledge. So over here, the T helper 1 activation. So activation of these T helper 1 is observed in both ulcerative colitis as well as in case of Crohn's disease. Whereas the T helper 2 activation, if you see, T helper 2 activation, it is observed in ulcerative colitis only. Whereas the T helper 17 activation, okay, T helper 17 activation, which is occurring, this helper 17 activation occurs because of increased interleukin 23 receptor polymorphism. Okay, polymorphism, as I am repeating again, these are variations of the normal, that is polymorphisms. So this T helper 17 is also seen to be associated with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Okay. And these alterations that we see, that is polymorphisms in the pro-inflammatory genes, polymorphisms in anti-inflammatory genes. Okay, so all these alterations that we are reading over here, they are also shown to be associated. They are also associated with other autoimmune disease, like diabetes. Okay, other autoimmune disease like diabetes mellitus, or even rheumatoid arthritis, okay, or psoriasis, etc. Okay, so this was the first pathogenic point, that is mucosal immunity. Okay, any doubts over here with regards to mucosal immunity? Yes. So the second important pathological or pathogenesis that leads to inflammatory bowel disease is autophagy. So do you remember about autophagy? This autophagy was the discussion, okay, in the previous lectures that I had already taken in general pathology. Can anyone tell me what is autophagy? It is also called as, yes,
self-eating.
So what is the importance of autophagy? Autophagy is a mechanism of survival. Okay, whenever there is a cellular stress, whenever there is a stress at the level of the cell, cellular stress, or there is a condition of nutrient deprivation, okay, our cells are going to eat its own parts so that they can survive, so that they can produce energy for survival. This is what happens normally. Okay, so in the process of autophagy, if you are going to remember, there was a particular gene called as ATG16L1, okay, and another gene that is IRGM. These two genes are important for normal autophagy, as they help in autophagosome formation. They help in autophagosome formation. Okay. Now, basically mutations, this particular gene, okay, if there is mutation in these genes, mutations in these genes are going to lead to defects in autophagy, and cellular stress response, as well as the cellular stress response. And this basically contributes to inflammatory bowel disease. This contributes to IBD. So if you all remember, when I taught you about autophagy, I had also discussed the clinical applications and the related disease conditions with autophagy. So one of those disease conditions, if you remember, was inflammatory bowel disease. So classically, the mutation in ATG16L1 has been associated with Crohn's disease. So we read about two important pathogenesis. The first was mucosal immunity. The second is disordered autophagy. Now, the third very important pathogenesis of inflammatory bowel disease is, if you see, it is the host microbial interactions. Host microbial interaction. So how is the interaction? Let us try to understand. So whatever interaction is there between the host and between the gut. So at birth, if you see, okay, so from birth, if you go towards childhood, this interaction with the gut microbiome is rather very simple, okay, at birth. But and why it is simple? Because there are decreased amount of gut microbes that are present at birth. But as the person ages, as the child is going to age, there will be more complex organisms which will be residing in the gut, and the interaction becomes a complex one. So there is a complex ecosystem which is formed. Okay. So by the time the child reaches, becomes a teen, in that particular situation, the interaction becomes very complex because of the excessive amount of microorganisms which are present over there. So, for example, how the microbes are playing an important role and influencing, let us see. So, microbes can do both the things. Okay. Certain microbes can secrete certain proteins. For example, protein 1 they are secreting. Okay. And these kind of protein, they can promote the disease. Let us see one important example. Example is one particular bacteria called as bifidobacterium. Now, this particular bacteria, it promotes T helper 17 differentiation. Now, if you remember, if you have already read my notes, and if you remember, this T helper 17 is stimulated by bacteria as well as fungus. So this is going to increase the immune response. So microbes itself are eliciting an immune response against themselves. This is one. There are certain microbes which are also releasing certain other proteins. Okay. For example, they're releasing protein type 2, for example. Now, these proteins, they might protect against the disease. They provide protection against the disease. That means this protein reduces the incidence of inflammatory bowel disease. How? So, for example, we have Clostridium. Now, this Clostridium organism, if you see, they stimulate certain T cells which are regulatory in nature. They stimulate regulatory T cells. Okay. So if you remember, regulatory T cells are those T cells which regulate or decrease the activation of other T cells like the cytotoxic T cells. Okay. I hope you all are known what are regulatory T cells. So microbes by itself, they might also promote the disease, or they might also protect against the disease depending upon the interaction. Now you understand why it is complex. Okay. Now, very, very important thing is that these microbial products that we are looking at right now, these microbial products that are released, okay, they are going to stimulate the receptors of the innate immune system. What is the innate immune system? Yes, can anyone tell me? Yes, these are those immune system which is always present from birth. It does not require any prior stimulation. Okay, no antigen stimulation is required for this immune response. So they are always there. So for example, certain innate immune receptors are toll-like receptor, or there are nod-like receptors, NLR. So these are all examples of innate immune receptor. Okay, so these microbial products, they can stimulate the innate immune receptors, and once these are stimulated, they can modulate the immune response. They can modulate the immune response. So as a result, there might be this immune response, okay, might be modulated. For example, this immune response might lead to the secretion of antimicrobial substances, like antimicrobial substances. And these antimicrobial substances might itself go and inhibit the growth of these microbes. Okay, so there is something called as dysbiosis. Okay, this is called as dysbiosis. Normally, the relation between the microbes and the relation with the host immune system is that of symbiosis. That is, both of them, they are having some benefit from each other. Okay, so this relationship becomes a dysbiotic one. Okay, is it clear to everyone? Yes. Any doubts with regard to the pathogenesis? So in the pathogenesis, we have discussed about the host microbial interaction, as in the microbes can secrete certain proteins which can either promote the disease or it can protect against the disease. Okay. And second thing, autophagy. Defective autophagy is also responsible for disease, most commonly mutations in ATG16L1 associated with Crohn's disease, and altered mucosal immunity. Okay, altered mucosal immunity, wherein there might be a pro-inflammatory stimulus or there might be an anti-inflammatory stimulus. Activation of certain T cells, CD4 plus T cells are there, seen in ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Okay, is this all right? Is the pathogenesis clear to everyone? Okay, now we are going to discuss the more, more interesting or less boring part. So we are going to discuss in a comparative way. Okay, we have Crohn's disease on one side. Okay, to discuss, we can have Crohn's disease on one side, and we will put ulcerative colitis on the other side. Let us try and understand about these. Okay. So first, let me just show you one diagram so that this point becomes clear to everyone. Okay, let me just add one diagram over here. Yes. So let me take this diagram and show. Is the diagram clear to everyone? Yes. Is it big enough?
Yes.
Is the diagram big enough to everyone? Yes. Okay. Visible to everyone? Okay. Okay. Let us see. So basically, if you see this diagram that we see over here, just one second, okay. Make it a little bit more big. Okay. Is it clear to everyone? Okay. So what we see over here, this is the ulcerative, this is the inflammatory bowel disease. This is the Crohn's disease that we see. And over here, what we see, we look at the ulcerative colitis lesion. Okay. So what is very important, if you look at the Crohn's disease, it is involving any part of the colon. Okay. Might it be the colon or the rectal part or the sigmoid colon part. Okay. Or it might involve the small intestine part as well. Can you appreciate the small intestine has been involved? And can you also see that there are certain areas which are involved, okay? And there are certain areas which are completely all right, okay? So there are skip areas, yes? So one very important point that we have to understand over here is that it is this Crohn's disease is occurring anywhere. It occurs anywhere, okay? But most importantly, it occurs at the level of the ileum and it involves the small intestine. Yes, you all will agree with me at this point? Yes, everyone is going to agree? Okay, everyone is going to agree with this point? Okay. Now, if you see over here, if you compare it with ulcerative colitis, what do we see? It is only the sigmoid colon. Okay, it is only the sigmoid colon and the rectum that is mainly involved. Yes. So over here, there's the involvement of the colon along with the rectum. Okay. Now, if we just take it a little bit up. Okay. Now, very importantly, as I told you, that in between the lesions over here, if you see, there are skip lesions. See, this portion is completely all right. Yes, this portion is completely all right. This portion is completely all right. But if you see over here, so over here, there are something called as skip lesions. That is in between the two lesions, the area that is present is completely all right. Okay. So in between, if you see this area, if you see, there are presence of what is called as skip lesions. Skip lesions are present over here. But over here, if you see, there are no skip lesions. Skip lesions, they are absent. In fact, there is a diffuse involvement. Yes, there is a diffuse involvement. Yes, everyone will appreciate this. Okay. One other thing, if you see, these lesions in case of Crohn's disease, they are accompanied with strictures. The areas have become stricken. Yes or no? But over here, there is no strictures which are present over here. So very important, strictures are something which are present over here, whereas the strictures are something which is rare over here. Agreed? Everyone agreed with this point? Okay. One very important thing, because there is a stricture, that means there was some fibrosis. And because if you look at the thickness, see, this is the mucosa that we are looking at. See, this portion that we see, what is this? This is this green portion, that is the mucosa. Beneath that is the submucosa. This red layer is the muscle layer, and then the pink layer is the serosa. Okay. So if you see in this case, okay, the inflammation is involving the entire thickness. Okay, the entire thickness is basically involved. So basically, because inflammation has involved the entire thickness, so basically at the end of inflammation, when it becomes chronic, there will be fibrosis. So there will be thickening. And because fibrosis is there, so there is also presence of strictures over here. That is also one of the reasons that strictures are present over here. So I will write over here that there is a thickening of the wall. Okay, Crohn's disease, the wall becomes very thick. Whereas in ulcerative colitis, if you understand, they have a normal thickness. The wall thickness is absolutely normal in this particular situation. Okay. Okay. Now, if I want to show you what is an ulcer, can anyone tell me what is the meaning of an ulcer? Yes. What is the meaning of an ulcer? An ulcer is any area, okay, where there is discontinuity of the epithelium. So this area, if you appreciate these area, this is the area showing ulcer. Yes. Over here, this green continuity is not there. It is missing. So basically, ulcers will be present in both types of inflammatory bowel disease. But the important feature over here is that this ulcer over here is very narrow, deep, knife-like, and it is extending up till the serosal layer. Whereas if you compare the same ulcer over here in this particular ulcerative colitis, they are more broad, they are not narrow, and they are more superficial. They are more superficial. Okay. So the third important point of the fifth important point of difference, that there is the presence of ulcer, but this ulcer is deep knife-like, deep knife-like ulcer. And this ulcer is reaching up till the serosa. It is reaching up till the serosa. Yes, everyone will agree with me in this point. And the ulcers in case of ulcerative colitis, if you see, they are broad-based shallow ulcer. Broad-based shallow ulcer.
Submucosal.
Okay, broad-based shallow ulcer is present over here. Yes, everyone appreciates with this point. Now, one important point I am going to tell you now. Okay, what is the important point over here is, see, the ulcer is not going, the ulcer or the inflammation, it is not extending beyond the mucosa. See, this orange is the mucosa. Sorry, this is the submucosa, and this green one is the mucosa. So inflammation, the ulcer, everything is limited till this submucosa. That becomes a very important point. Okay. Now, very importantly, if you see, because it is a broad-based ulcer, if you see, in between this normal proportion which is remaining, it seems that they are protruding out. So this forms a polyp, but it is not a true polyp. Because it is not a true polyp. A true polyp will have epithelial lining throughout, but this is not having the epithelial lining throughout because the submucosa region doesn't have any lining. So this forms what is called as pseudopolyp, which is more common in case of ulcerative colitis. I will discuss and differentiate all the points. Stay tuned. Okay. Okay. Now you tell me one important thing. Okay. What is this layer that I have drawn over here? What is this layer? Yes. What is this? This is the mesentery. This is the mesentery. Okay. Or it is the fat covering the intestine. Now, if you see, there is a hypertrophy of the mesentery. Why do you think there is a hypertrophy of the mesentery? Because this ulcer, the inflammation has reached the serosa. And once the inflammation is reaching the serosa, what is going to happen? There might be perforation. There might be a through and through perforation. So what will happen, that this fat that is present, this mesenteric fat, it will come and it is going to close and cover that region. Okay, so that is called as a creeping fat appearance, which is classical feature only in case of Crohn's disease. Okay, so there is a creeping fat. There is a creeping fat to cover the serosa. To cover the serosa, we have a creeping fat. But over here, the creeping fat over here is not present at all. Now you tell me one important thing. If you see, will there be, do you know what is the difference between a fistula and a sinus? Yes, can anyone tell me what is the difference between fistula and sinus? Yes, can anyone tell me? What is the difference between fistula and sinus? See, whenever both the ends are open, okay, we call it as a fistula, that is through and through. And if one end is open and other end is closed, this is called as a sinus. Okay, so remember this point. So over here, what is happening? The ulcer is going down and ultimately it is going to perforate through and through across the GI epithelium. So what is going to happen over here? There will be formation of a perforation or a fissure. Okay, so there will be a fissure formation. So fissure formation is common in Crohn's disease. Fissure or can be, or perforation is far more common over here. Whereas because the ulcers in case of ulcerative colitis is not that much deep. So do you see any kind of fissure over here? Yes. Do you see any kind of fissure over here? Yes. Any fissure? No, there will not be, because it is not reaching the serosa. Okay, so these are very broad-based shallow ulcer not reaching the serosa. So it is not present again over here. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Acha, before I go further, I am going to show you certain diagrams so that things become clearer to you all. Okay, let me. Yes, tell me. Hello? Yes, any doubt?
Sir, can you explain that creeping fat once more?
Yes, I am going to explain you the creeping fat. Okay, it's not a problem at all. I will just explain it to you. See over here, why I was saying about the creeping fat, what is the importance of the creeping fat? Let me tell you. See over here, in case of Crohn's disease, the ulcer, if you see, it is going deep and it is involving the serosa. If you see, the ulcer is going very deep. And as a result, what is happening? There will be through and through perforation. It is reaching. So inflammation is reaching up till the serosa. So there might be a perforation also. So to cover this perforation, what happens that the fat, it creeps on and it covers this. This yellow part is the fat. Okay. This is the mesentery, the fat which is lining the intestine. Okay. And it comes and it covers it completely. That is why it is called as a creeping fat. Okay. Whereas no such creeping fat is present in case of ulcerative colitis. I will show you this diagram. It will become more clear to you all. This is a case of a Crohn's disease, which over here, if you see, is showing, let me take a lighter color so it will become more clear. So this portion, if you see, there is a stricture over here. There is a stricture which is present over here. This is the area. Can you appreciate? This has shown complete perforation. Yes or no? There is a perforation which has taken place over here. Now, I was talking about something called as creeping fat. Can you appreciate this fat has gone and it is covering? Yes, this fat has actually covered the entire serosa. This is the creeping fat appearance. This is the classical creeping fat appearance that we see in case of Crohn's disease. Is this point very clear to you all? Yes? Yes, very clear. Okay, let me just show you one more diagram. Before I go to the other diagram, okay, just let me show you one more diagram so that it becomes more easy for you to understand. Okay, this is one other diagram which is basically for ulcerative colitis. Now, as I told you, there are few important points over here, if you will imagine. So this is a case of ulcerative colitis which has involved the entire colon. Okay, so the entire colon from this part to this part has been involved. So what is important over here? If you see, this entire part has been involved. Okay. Now, unlike the Crohn's disease, if you see over here, the thickness is maintained. There is no strictures whatsoever. One other important thing over here, as I told you, as I had explained over here, that see, there is a clear-cut demarcation. This is the normal mucosa and this is the abnormal mucosa. So there is a clear-cut demarcation is there in case of ulcerative colitis. And as I told you, can you appreciate this round thing? What are these? Let me see if anyone can answer. What are these round elevated things? Yes, over here.
Pseudopolyp.
Very good, fantastic. These are these pseudopolyp, and I explained you why they are called as pseudopolyp. Yes, I had shown you over here the presence of a pseudopolyp. Okay, and what is the importance of the pseudopolyp? Okay, why they are forming? Because these are broad-based shallow ulcers. So in between mucosa, submucosa, it seems like they are elevated. Okay, so they form the pseudopolyp, which is classically seen in this particular case. Now, sometimes if two pseudopolyp, they might join with each other. Okay, and this is called as a mucosal bridging. This is called as mucosal bridging, which is again an important feature of ulcerative colitis. Okay, so I hope these gross features are very clear to everyone. Okay, so let me just continue with the differences, because everything is going to end with the differences only, which is very important. Okay. Now, let me draw another diagram over here. Okay, let me draw another diagram over here. Okay. So this is the intestine area of the Crohn's disease which is involved, and this is the other diagram over here which we have drawn. Now, what is seen that in case of Crohn's disease, what did we see? That there were deep knife-like serpentine ulcers like this. Okay, there are areas showing deep knife-like ulcers. So the ulcers are somewhat like this. They are deep and serpentine. Serpentine means snake-like. Okay, so we are having deep serpentine ulcers. We are having deep serpentine ulcers. So what happens when you are having deep serpentine ulcers? The in-between area that is there, that remains normal. Okay, that remains normal like this. Okay, the in-between areas which I'm showing to you, it remains normal. Okay, I'll just label all of them. So what happens? It gives a very classical look. Can anyone tell me what is this look called as? Yes, these are deep serpentine ulcers. Okay, and these are the normal skip areas or normal mucosa that is there. Yes, So what happens, you will see that there are certain areas showing ulceration, and in between areas they are elevated. So this gives the classic appearance of cobblestone appearance, which is a classical feature of Crohn's disease. Yes, everyone agrees to this point? Cobblestone appearance. So the cobblestone appearance is seen where? It is classically seen in Crohn's disease. Whereas if you see in case of ulcerative colitis, what is this? There will be a clear-cut demarcation between the abnormal area and the normal area. The abnormal area, if you are going to see, they are going to show a diffuse involvement. There are no skip areas. There is a diffuse involvement. In case of ulcerative colitis, there is no skip areas, okay? And this diffuse involvement is seen as completely red and granular areas, red and granular. So as we had seen over here, can you appreciate over here this area which has become completely red granular? Yes, this area that is red and granular. Yes, this part. Yes, everyone, you are with me? This area is red and granular. Any doubts over here? This area is completely red and granular. Yes, any doubts? Okay. Let me just come down. Okay. Now, also one important fact over here that I already mentioned, that there is an abrupt transition is there. Abrupt transition between normal and abnormal area. Yes? Okay. So cobblestone appearance is a classical feature of Crohn's disease. They have alternating skip areas and normal mucosas with deep serpentine knife-like ulcers. Okay. Whereas over here, they are more shallow and broad-based ulcers with a diffuse involvement. There are no skip areas. And these areas which are diffusely involved are red and granular, and they have an abrupt transition between normal and abnormal areas. So coming back to the differences over here. Okay. So pseudopolyps are classically seen in case of ulcerative colitis, whereas over here they are moderately seen, they are not that much marked, whereas pseudopolyps over here they are quite marked. Okay, if I have to specify the site, okay, if I have to specify the site of Crohn's disease, it is more common in the, as I told you before, it is more common in the terminal ileum, okay, in the ileocecal junction, and it is common in the cecal area or in the cecum. Okay, whereas the most common site for ulcerative colitis is your rectum, so it is called as proctitis, or it will involve the sigmoid colon, so it is causing proctosigmoiditis. Okay, or it causes what is called as a pancolitis. Okay, causes a pancolitis. Now remember one important thing. In case of your Crohn's disease, the involvement of the small intestine only is seen in 40% of the cases. The involvement of a small intestine plus colon is seen in 30% of the cases, whereas the rest 30% might show just the colonic involvement only. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Okay. Now we are going to understand, very important, the microscopic picture. Please pay a lot of attention, everyone over here. Let me show you the microscopic picture over here. So normally in the intestine, if you look at the lining, okay, so there are some areas which are elevated across the surface. Okay, what is this area called as? This is called as a villi. Okay, and there are certain areas which go deep. Okay, that is called as a crypt. Okay, why I'm telling you? Because the microscopic examination is completely based on this. Okay, so very, very important. This is one diagram of inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, and in the end, you will tell me which inflammatory bowel disease it is. So this is a crypt. This is a normal villus, and this is a normal crypt. Now, can you see over here at this particular point, this particular crypt? Is it looking like a normal crypt? Yes. Is it normal? What can you see over here? What can you appreciate? Over here, the number one thing I can see,
neutrophils.
Neutrophilic infiltration. Neutrophilic infiltration is seen over here. And this neutrophilic infiltration, what is it doing? This neutrophilic infiltration is actually causing damage to this particular crypt. Okay, it is leading to what is called as a crypt damage. Now this cycle of crypt damage, it goes on. There will be damage, there will be healing. Okay, so there will be repeated cycles. Okay, this repeated cycle of crypt damage and this crypt healing, repeated damage and healing is going to lead to what is called as, yes, what is the term that we use? Yes, it will ruin the crypt. This will lead to what is called as crypt distortion. The crypt has become distorted. Can you appreciate the shape of the crypt? It has become bizarre, okay, abnormal shaped, and there is a crypt dilatation. The crypt has become completely dilated. Okay, crypt has become distorted and dilated. Okay, now can you see, now for example, this is also a crypt that I am showing you. Now this is that crypt. If the section has gone like this, okay, the transverse section, then if you look from top at the crypt, you are seeing that the crypt is containing the neutrophils. What is this structure called as? Yes, it is called as a crypt abscess. Crypt containing neutrophils is called as a crypt abscess. Okay, so why am I telling you all these things in details? Because these findings that I have discussed in details over here, they are seen more or less in both ulcerative colitis as well as in Crohn's disease. So the neutrophilic infiltration leading to the crypt damage, which on a period of time leads to repeated damage and healing, leading to crypt distortion. The crypt will become distorted, bizarre shaped. And also some of the crypts might be filled up just with the neutrophils. And this is actually called as the presence of a crypt abscess. So is this clear what a crypt abscess is, what a crypt distortion is, and what neutrophilic infiltration looks like? This is common across all inflammatory bowel disease. Now, let me just tell you, let me just ask you, what is this? Can anyone tell me? What is this? It is a non-caseating granuloma. It is a non-caseating granuloma. Okay, and this non-caseating granuloma is present in case of Crohn's disease and is very specific just for Crohn's disease. Okay, now look, this is the mucosa, submucosa. So there's a mucosa, submucosa. Over here, the muscle layer will be there, and this is the serosal layer. So if you see, the inflammation has completely reached the serosa. So this particular diagram is especially for Crohn's disease. So these are the non-caseating granulomas that we are watching. What are these? These are the non-caseating granulomas which are present throughout the epithelium. Okay, this is present throughout the epithelium, and the presence of this non-caseating granuloma along with the presence of a transmural inflammation is indicative that this diagram is for Crohn's disease. Any doubts you are having with regards to Crohn's disease now? Yes, everyone. Any doubts you are having? Yes. So can we write our findings now? The microscopic features. Yes, everyone. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So if these features are clear, so we are just going to write. So there's a presence of non-caseating granuloma, which is present in 35% cases of Crohn's disease, whereas this non-caseating granuloma is not at all present in ulcerative colitis. The inflammation, as we had seen, it is transmural over here, okay, extending through the entire thickness. All the layers, including the serosa, is involved. But over here, just the mucosa and the submucosa part will be involved. Other features you will write in both of them. That is, the neutrophilic infiltration, crypt distortion, crypt abscess is present in both ulcerative and Crohn's disease. Okay, very important. As I told you, the mucosal bridges are present over here in case of ulcerative colitis, whereas it is absent over here. The bridges are absent. The bridges are absent over here. Okay. Now we have completed the microscopic picture of each. We have completed the gross picture of each. Let me just show you certain more diagrams, microscopic images, so it becomes more clear for you that how does everything looks in reality. Let me add this particular image. Okay. Is this image very clear to you all? Now, if I ask you questions, will you people be able to answer? Okay. So tell me, what is this? What is this?
Crypts.
Very good. This is a crypt. Fantastic. Now, what is this? Yes.
The dilated
Yes,
crypts
this is
and
a
further.
dilated, damaged, crypt distortion. This is a hallmark feature of inflammatory bowel disease. Very, very important to understand. Acha, tell me, what is this? What is this? What has happened over here? There is a deep knife-like ulceration that has taken place. See, there is no epithelial lining over there. And what is this? Yes.
Granuloma.
Very good. This is a non-caseating granuloma characterizing Crohn's disease. Okay, very important. And why have I shown you this whole diagram? This is the mucosa, submucosal layer, this is the muscle layer, and this is the serosa. And all these are non-caseating granulomas. Okay, you can appreciate. But this non-caseating granuloma, if you see, it is present throughout, and the inflammation is present from here till here. So this is what is called as a transmural. Okay, this is called as transmural. See why we are taking this lecture in this manner. So you can differentiate, you can see, you can understand. And after this lecture, this should be printed in your brain so that you don't have to mug up anything. Okay. So that is why try to read in this particular manner. Try to compare and contrast. Okay. Now in the similar way, as we have compared and contrasted the gross microscopic picture, we are also going to read about the clinical features of the same. Now, what do you think the clinical features of these patients will present with? These patients are going to present with abdominal pain. Okay. They will also present with bloody diarrhea. Okay. And they will have abdominal cramps, and they will also have fever. So these features are very similar to ulcerative colitis also. Okay. It's the same. Okay. Now, very important other thing is that one important thing that we see in case of Crohn's disease, that Crohn's disease, it is an active disease. Okay. And that is now going to go into remission. Active disease is going to go into remission, and again the disease will become active. So there is a chance of recurrence. High rates of recurrence is seen in case of Crohn's disease. Now, there are some kinds of very important triggers that we see for Crohn's disease. What are those triggers? The triggers are physical stress, okay, and emotional stress. Both this physical and emotional stress, okay, they can trigger Crohn's disease. And not only Crohn's disease, these features are again same in case of ulcerative colitis. But what is something which is very special to Crohn's disease? The association with smoking. Okay, the association is smoking. Now, Crohn's disease is strongly associated with smoking. And the worst thing is that once the smoking has initiated Crohn's disease, it cannot be reversed after we stop the smoking. Okay. Also, smoking might be associated with ulcerative colitis, but over here with reversal, if you stop smoking, the ulcerative colitis can be reversed. Whereas over here, if you stop smoking, Crohn's disease cannot be reversed. It is not reversible after stopping smoking. Very, very important point of difference. Okay, let me go to the complications now. Okay. So both of them, they have some or the other complications that we have to understand. So the complications are very much, it is very common. It's a common sense question. Why? Because according to the site of involvement, you have the complications. Because small intestinal involvement is more in case of Crohn's disease. So this disorder will be characterized by hypoalbuminemia. Okay, because there will be protein losing enteropathy, so loss of proteins will be there. There will be fat malabsorption, even vitamin B12 malabsorption will be there, because all these absorption takes place in the small intestine. Okay, again, very important thing is that all these features, this is not seen over here. Okay, small intestinal involvement, hypoalbuminemia, these features are not present over here. Very important thing over here is that the presence of strictures, as we have already discussed, is present over here. So strictures, fissures, if there will be fissures, it might lead to, there is a perforation, all these things. Okay, even abscess, peritoneal abscess, all these things are more common over here. It is not seen. These complications are not seen over here. Okay. Now, very important is the malignant potential. the malignant potential, if you see, is present not only here, and it is also present here. And actually, malignant potential over here means I am talking about colonic adenocarcinoma. So malignant potential over here is associated with colonic involvement. If it is involved over here, colon is always involved. So over here, the most important factor that influences the development of malignancy is the duration of the disease. Okay, so the longer the duration, more is the chance of having malignancy. This is it. Okay, let me go to the next.
Sir,
One important complication over here is that is very important in case of ulcerative colitis is the development of toxic megacolon. This important complication is present here. It is negative over here. And recurrence after surgery is very high in case of Crohn's disease, whereas it is not present in case of ulcerative colitis. Having said that, coming to the last leg of today's topic is what are the extraintestinal manifestations. Very important. Or extraintestinal involvement. So most of these are present in both of them, but some of them are very important. So cutaneous nodules. So you will find the skin showing certain nodules, or cutaneous granulomas, or you are going to find the presence of erythema nodosum, or there will be clubbing of the fingers. So all these related with your skin and nails together. Then your eyes might be involved, so you might have uveitis. Okay, then involvement of the joint. There is a migratory polyarthritis. Then ankylosing spondylitis might be there. Sacroiliitis. So I have grouped these features. So this is over here, the joint involvement is there, and this over here, the skin and nail involvement is there. You might just remember in this particular manner. And all these involvement are very much the same in case of ulcerative colitis. But there is one important MCQ over here that I want to discuss, is the presence of primary sclerosing cholangitis. It is present in both the condition, but it is much more common in case of ulcerative colitis. So with this, we have discussed all the important features, including the extraintestinal involvement.